A powerful HOA president snatched my twin children from our yard in broad daylight, claiming I was negligent. She drove away with their screaming faces pressed against the window. But she had no idea the fury she unleashed in a mother fighting for her babies' lives. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching so liquor and subscribe for more stories. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was folding laundry in the living room while my 7-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, played in our front yard. The sun was warm, the birds were singing, and I could hear their innocent laughter drifting through the open window. I smiled to myself, thinking how blessed I was to have such beautiful children. I had no idea that in less than an hour, my entire world would shatter into a million pieces. My name is Sarah Mitchell and I'm a single mother. My husband died 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving me alone to raise our twins. It hasn't been easy, but we've managed. We moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood hoping for peace and safety. What I got instead was a nightmare wearing pearls and carrying a clipboard. Karen Henderson was our HOA president. She was a woman in her late 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive clothes, and a permanent look of disapproval on her face. From the day we moved in, she made our lives difficult. My grass was too long. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My children's toys in the yard were unsightly. Every week brought a new violation notice, a new fine, a new complaint. But I never imagined she would go this far. I was hanging up one of Ethan's shirts when I heard a car door slam. I glanced out the window and saw Karen's white Mercedes parked in front of my house. My stomach tightened. She was walking toward my children with that fake smile she always wore when she was about to cause trouble. I watched as she bent down and spoke to Emma and Ethan. They looked confused. Then, to my absolute horror, she took each of them by the hand and started leading them toward her car. My heart stopped. I dropped the shirt and ran. I flew out the front door so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. "Stop!" I screamed, running barefoot across the lawn. "What are you doing?" "Those are my children." Karen turned to me with the coldest smile I've ever seen. These children were playing unsupervised, which violates HOA Regulation 47B. I'm taking them into protective custody until you learn to be a responsible parent. Protective custody? I could barely breathe. "You can't take my children. You have no right." "I have every right," she said calmly, still holding their hands. Emma started crying. Ethan looked terrified. "As HOA president, I'm responsible for the safety and well-being of this community. These children were in danger. They were playing in our own yard. I was right inside." My voice was shaking with rage and fear. I reached for Emma, but Karen pulled her back. "Don't touch her," Karen said sharply. "I'm calling the police now to report your negligence. If you try to stop me, I'll add assault to the charges." I stood there, frozen in disbelief, as this woman opened her car door and put my babies inside. Emma was crying so hard she could barely breathe. Ethan was calling out, "Mommy? Mommy?" with tears streaming down his face. "Please," I begged, my own tears falling now. "Please don't do this. They're all I have. Please." Karen got into her car without another word. She locked the doors and drove away with my children in the back seat, their small faces pressed against the window, watching me get smaller and smaller as she drove down the street. I collapsed on the lawn, my legs giving out beneath me. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. The world was spinning and nothing made sense. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. I don't remember calling the police. I don't remember much of the next hour. I was shaking so violently that I could barely hold my phone. When the police arrived, I tried to explain what happened, but my words came out in broken sobs. "Ma'am, calm down," the officer said. "Who took your children?" "Karen Henderson," I managed to say. "The HOA president. She just put them in her car and drove away." The officers exchanged glances. "Did she say where she was taking them?" "No. She said she was putting them in protective custody. She said I was negligent. But I wasn't. I was right inside the house. They were playing in our yard. Please, you have to find them. Please." They made some calls. They asked me questions. They took notes. But I could see it in their eyes. They weren't moving fast enough. Every second felt like an eternity. My babies were out there somewhere with that horrible woman, scared and confused, and I couldn't protect them. "We've located her vehicle," one officer finally said after what felt like hours. "She's at her residence. We're sending units there now." "I'm coming with you," I said, already heading toward my car. "Ma'am, it's better if you wait here." "Those are my children," I screamed. "I'm coming with you." They didn't argue further. I followed the police cars to Karen's house. my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. When we arrived, Karen's car was in the driveway. The police knocked on the door. She opened it with that same calm, collected expression, as if she hadn't just committed a crime. "Good afternoon, officers," she said pleasantly. "How can I help you?" "Ma'am, we have a report that you took 2 children without their mother's permission." "Oh, that," Karen waved her hand dismissively. "I was simply protecting those poor children from neglect. Their mother leaves them unsupervised constantly. Someone needed to intervene." "Where are the children now?" "They're in my guest room having cookies and watching television. They're perfectly safe." I pushed past the officers. "Emma. Ethan." "Ma'am, please wait outside," one officer said, but I didn't care. I ran through Karen's house, calling their names. I found them in a small bedroom at the end of the hall. They were sitting on a bed, still crying, holding each other. The moment they saw me, they ran into my arms. I held them so tight, sobbing into their hair, feeling their small bodies shake against mine. "It's okay," I whispered. "Mommy's here. You're safe now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Behind me, I heard the officers talking to Karen. She was still defending herself, still claiming she had done the right thing. I turned to face her, my children clinging to me, and I felt a rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced. "You took my children," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You stole them from their own yard. You terrified them. You made them cry. For what? Because you don't like how I keep my lawn." Karen's expression didn't change. "I did what was necessary. If you were a better mother—" "I'm pressing charges," I interrupted. "Kidnapping. Child endangerment. Whatever else applies. You're going to pay for what you did." Karen laughed. Actually laughed. "Good luck with that. I have connections in this town. My husband is a lawyer. You're just a struggling single mother who can barely afford to live here. Who do you think people will believe?" The officers arrested her right there. They put handcuffs on her wrists while she protested loudly, claiming this was all a misunderstanding, that she was the victim here. I took my children home, holding them close, promising them over and over that they were safe, that nobody would ever take them away again. But the nightmare was far from over. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. Emma stopped eating. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, terrified that the bad lady was coming back. Ethan became withdrawn and quiet, no longer the cheerful boy he used to be. They were both afraid to play outside, even in our own yard. They needed constant reassurance that I was there, that I wouldn't let anyone take them. I had to take them to a child psychologist. Hearing my 7-year-olds describe their trauma, watching them draw pictures of themselves crying in a strange woman's car, broke my heart over and over again. The therapist said they would heal, but it would take time. Time and safety and consistency. Meanwhile, Karen's lawyer husband pulled every string he could. He got her bail reduced. He convinced several neighbors to write character references. He painted her as a concerned community member who made an error in judgment. The district attorney seemed ready to offer her a plea deal: reckless endangerment instead of kidnapping, probation instead of prison time. I couldn't let that happen. I hired a lawyer even though I could barely afford it. I emptied my savings account. I took on extra shifts at work. I was not going to let Karen get away with this. She didn't just break the law, she broke my children's sense of safety in the world. She deserved to face real consequences. The trial date was set for 3 months later. Those months felt like years. Every day, I watched my children struggle with their fear and anxiety. Every night, I held them while they cried. Every moment, I felt the weight of what Karen had done to our family. But I also felt something else growing inside me. Determination. Strength. A fierce protective instinct that wouldn't let me give up. Karen had underestimated me. She thought I was weak, that I would crumble under pressure. She was wrong. The day of the trial finally came. The courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking confident and composed. Her lawyer was polished and professional. They clearly thought this would be easy. My lawyer stood up and delivered the opening statement. He explained what happened that day. He described how Karen, with no legal authority whatsoever, removed 2 children from their yard and drove away with them while their mother begged her to stop. He talked about the trauma Emma and Ethan had endured. He called it exactly what it was: kidnapping. Then it was time for witnesses. My neighbors testified that they saw what happened. The police officers described the scene they found: 2 terrified children who had been taken from their mother against their will. The child psychologist explained the long-term effects of such traumatic experiences on young minds. And then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. And then I told my story. I described the sound of Emma's crying as she was pulled away from me. I talked about Ethan's nightmares, how he now asks me every 5 minutes if I'm going to leave him. I explained how our lives had been destroyed by one woman's need for power and control. I looked directly at Karen as I spoke. Her face remained cold and unmoved. She showed no remorse, no understanding of what she had done. She sat there like she was the victim in all of this. Then came the cross-examination. Karen's lawyer tried to paint me as a negligent mother. He asked about times my grass was too long or my trash cans were left out. He suggested that my children playing unsupervised in the yard was dangerous. He implied that Karen was simply trying to protect them. But I didn't break. I stayed calm and answered every question honestly. Yes, sometimes my grass gets long because I'm working 2 jobs to support my children. Yes, sometimes I forget to bring the trash cans in because I'm exhausted. But I have never, not for one single moment, neglected my children. They are my whole world. And this woman took them from me because she didn't like the way I painted my mailbox. The courtroom was silent. Then Karen took the stand. Her lawyer asked her gentle questions, trying to make her seem sympathetic. She talked about her dedication to the community, her concerns about safety, her belief that she was doing the right thing. But during cross-examination, my lawyer destroyed her. He asked her about the HOA regulations she claimed gave her authority. She couldn't cite a single one that justified taking someone's children. He asked her if she had any training in child welfare or protective services. She didn't. He asked her why she didn't simply call the actual authorities if she was so concerned. She had no good answer. Isn't it true, Ms. Henderson, my lawyer said, that you've filed over 30 complaints against Ms. Mitchell since she moved into the neighborhood? Isn't it true that you fined her repeatedly for minor violations? Isn't it true that you told other neighbors you wanted to make her life so miserable she'd leave? Karen's face went red. I never said that. We have witnesses who will testify otherwise. Ms. Henderson, you didn't take those children to protect them. You took them to hurt their mother. You took them because you wanted power over someone you saw as beneath you. You traumatized 2 innocent children to satisfy your own ego. Isn't that the truth? No, Karen said, but her voice wavered. The jury saw through her. I could see it in their faces. Closing arguments came next. Karen's lawyer tried one last time to spin the narrative, to make this seem like a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But my lawyer stood up and spoke from the heart. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, this case is not complicated. A woman with no legal authority took 2 children from their mother. She put them in her car. She drove away. She kept them locked in a room while their mother was frantic with worry. What do we call it when someone takes children without permission? When they transport them to another location? When they refuse to return them? We call it kidnapping. The fact that Karen Henderson was wearing expensive clothes instead of a mask doesn't change what this was. The fact that she had good intentions, if you believe that, doesn't make it legal. She broke the law. She traumatized 2 children. She must face consequences. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting, praying, hoping for justice. Emma and Ethan were with a babysitter, but I could feel their presence with me, their fear and pain driving me forward. Finally the jury came back. We all stood as they entered. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the judge asking for the verdict. On the count of kidnapping in the 1st degree, we find the defendant guilty. I nearly collapsed. Guilty. They said guilty. On the count of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. Karen's face went white. Her husband grabbed her hand. Her lawyer objected loudly, but the verdict stood. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. I brought Emma and Ethan with me. They needed to see that justice existed, that people who hurt them would face consequences. The therapist said it might help them heal. The judge was an older woman with kind eyes but a stern expression. She reviewed the case thoroughly. She read statements from the psychologist about my children's trauma. She looked at the evidence. And then she looked directly at Karen. Ms. Henderson, she said, you committed one of the most egregious crimes imaginable. You took 2 children from their mother not because they were in danger but because of your own need for control and power. You traumatized these children deeply. You showed no remorse during this trial. You still believe you did nothing wrong. That attitude tells me you are a danger to this community. Therefore, I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed by law. 15 years to life in prison. The courtroom erupted. Karen's husband jumped up, yelling. Her lawyer objected frantically. But the judge's gavel came down hard. This sentence is final. Ms. Henderson will serve a minimum of 15 years before being eligible for parole. Court is adjourned. I held my children as Karen was led away in handcuffs. Emma whispered, "Is she going away forever, Mommy?" "For a very long time, sweetheart. She can't hurt you anymore." Ethan looked up at me with his big brown eyes. "Are we safe now?" I kissed his forehead. "We're safe now, baby. We're safe." That night, for the first time in months, both children slept through the entire night without nightmares. I lay awake in the silence, feeling a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't over, they still had healing to do, we all did, but justice had been served. The monster who took my children was behind bars where she belonged. The HOA elected a new president. Several neighbors apologized to me, admitting they had known Karen was out of control but were too afraid to speak up. I accepted their apologies, though the words felt hollow compared to what my children had endured. Emma and Ethan slowly returned to themselves. The nightmares became less frequent. Emma started eating again. Ethan's smile came back, tentative at first, then growing brighter each day. They went back to playing in the yard, though for a long time I stayed right beside them, unable to let them out of my sight. The therapist said we were making good progress. She said children are resilient, that with love and support they would recover. I hope she was right. I prayed every night that my babies would be okay, that this horrible experience wouldn't define their lives forever. 6 months after the trial, we had a small celebration. Emma and Ethan had completed their therapy program. They were both doing well in school again. They had friends. They laughed and played like normal kids. We made cupcakes together and watched their favorite movie, and for the first time since that terrible day I felt like we were going to be okay. "Mommy?" Emma said that night as I tucked her into bed. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad that bad lady is gone. But I'm more glad that you never gave up on us. You fought for us. You protected us. You're the bravest person I know." Tears filled my eyes. "You two are the bravest. You went through something terrible and you survived. I'm so proud of you." Ethan called out from his room. "Mommy, come here too." I went to his bedside. He took my hand and said, "I love you, Mommy. You're my hero." "I love you too, buddy. Both of you. More than anything in the world. And I will always, always protect you. No matter what." As I turned off their lights and closed their doors, I thought about everything that had happened. Karen had tried to break us. She had tried to destroy our family. She had caused pain and trauma that would take years to fully heal from. But she had failed. We were still standing. We were still together. And she was the one locked away paying for her crimes. Some people might say 15 years to life was too harsh. That she was just a woman who made a terrible mistake. But those people didn't see my children's faces that day. They didn't hear Emma's screams or see Ethan's tears. They didn't watch their babies struggle with nightmares and anxiety for months afterward. Karen didn't make a mistake. She made a choice. She chose to hurt children to satisfy her own ego. She chose to traumatize a family because she didn't like the way they kept their lawn. She chose cruelty over compassion, power over kindness. And now she would live with the consequences of that choice for the rest of her life. As for us, we're healing. We're growing. We're learning to trust the world again, one day at a time. Emma wants to be a lawyer when she grows up, to help other people fight for justice. Ethan wants to be a police officer, to protect people who can't protect themselves. My children took their pain and decided to turn it into purpose. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. Every year on the anniversary of that terrible day, we don't talk about Karen or what she did. Instead, we celebrate our strength. We celebrate our family. We celebrate the fact that we survived and came out stronger on the other side. Because that's what Karen could never understand. She thought she could break us with her cruelty. She thought she had power over us. But the truth is she never had any power at all. The only power that matters is love. And our love for each other is unbreakable. Karen is in prison, forgotten by most of the world. But my children? They're thriving. They're happy. They're loved. They know, without any doubt, that their mother will fight for them until her last breath. And that's the real victory. Not the guilty verdict or the sentence, though those things mattered. The real victory is that my children are okay. That they sleep peacefully at night. That they play and laugh and dream about their futures. Karen tried to steal that from us. She failed. We won. Love won. Justice won. And that's all that matters.